Welcome to another session of Stelmo's Rants and Raves. I'm Stelmo. Let's just jump right in there. You know, today I want to talk about this clown, this leftist loon named Fauci, who pleaded the fifth, which pretty much I think was to be expected. And I listened to all the pundits on the right, and many of them are saying, well, he has a pardon, so he's not in any jeopardy, so he should testify. Well, look, he has a Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. Now, here in a bit, I'm going to talk about Florida has announced that they've initiated an investigation into him. If he makes incriminating statements, they can be used by each of the states against them. So, again, this shouldn't be based on party. It should be based on right or wrong. And as much as I dislike him taking the Fifth Amendment, I understand that that's his right. And we will be in a lot of trouble if we allow them to force somebody or to compel somebody to testify in a federal proceeding because they're immune one way or another, whether it be a pardon or use immunity or whichever route. Then the states can get them. And so I think what you'd see happen is the two of them would be playing games with each other. The feds would be helping the state, and the state would be helping the feds. And in the meantime, it would dilute the rights that we have. Now, so, look, I'm not against Fauci using the Fifth Amendment. It is his right. It is a right that all Americans have. And we shouldn't complain about it. Now, even though raising the Fifth Amendment is not supposed to raise any red flags, I think most people look at it as an admission of guilt. And so that's something Fauci's going to have to live with. And, I don't know, I'm also bothered by Florida announcing that they're going to investigate Fauci. The problem I have is, where have you been all this time? What did you glean from that hearing where he took the Fifth Amendment? What did you glean from that hearing that you didn't otherwise have as evidence? And let me tell you, the answer is nothing. And so, look, I hope Florida's serious about this. But I believe if they were serious, they might have done this like 6 months, maybe even a year ago. Why did Florida even have to wait for the Trump administration? Why didn't Florida open their investigation during the Biden administration? I don't know the answer to that question, but I find it really suspicious now that, Fauci is in all the headlines, that the state of Florida is grabbing into those headlines, saying we're going to investigate the guy. Well, I don't think that, we hear all the time that they can't comment on ongoing investigations. So I don't know why. Why would they announce this other than, I think they're gaslighting us. This is something the Republicans are far too famous for. Just look at President Trump's DOJ, and I feel really sorry for the president. He cannot find an attorney general who is going to be his wingman. And I was really disappointed with Pam Bondi. I was disappointed right when she was being questioned by the Senate. So many times these Democrats were trying to hit her up with gotcha questions. And all she should have said is I just want to be president, if confirmed, I just want to be President Trump's wingman. And yeah, they'd be outraged at that, but let them be outraged because they're the ones who set that precedent. But see, Republicans are too timid. They just won't push back. They're afraid of the mainstream mess ostracizing them in the press. Well, guess what? That's going to happen anyway. But you know, we're at a point in our country where it's survival is the most important thing. Because these socialists are they're expanding their power base. And I think this is going to keep happening. And why is it going to keep happening? Because right now capitalism is failing. And why is capitalism failing? It's failing because we're $40 trillion in debt. You know, Donald Trump used to get so aggravated with Powell when he was the head of the Fed. And President Trump wanted him to lower the interest rates because we're paying far too much in interest on our debt. But you know, I think even if they lower the interest rates now, it's not going to affect the 10-year, because the problem is the borrowers are no longer willing to lend money at, you know, less than 1% interest. It's just not going to happen. And for long-term debt, you know, it's going to go to 6, 7, 8%. It's going to keep climbing. You know, I think the Fed and Warsh made a big mistake by not raising interest rates a quarter point this last meeting here just the other day. And, you know, it reminds me, I'm not going to name this individual. I listen to him pretty regularly, and generally speaking, I respect him, and he's been pretty honest up until here in the last 24 hours when I saw his latest podcast, and he's trying to make the argument that there really is no inflation right now. At best, what we're suffering through is energy shock. Yes, energy shock. Well, you know, I have several problems with this. The first problem I have is this guy's smart, and he knows what the definition of inflation is. The definition of inflation is very simple. It's an increase in the money supply. So in that regard, the money supply has been increasing somewhat steadily, and it's going to continue to have to. And you know what? It's actually going to be expanding because nobody or very few people are lending us money anymore. They see a risk in it. You know, we're at 125% of our GDP. And of course, I think that they overevaluate our GDP. I think it's much lower. You know, the way I figure it, our economy should be in contraction. And that just has to do with the population of baby boomers retiring and passing away. And, you know, each subsequent year, the birth rate was lower and lower and lower. So you're always going to have more people retiring from the workforce than entering into the workforce. And it just seems logical to me when you have less workers that the GDP is going to be less. But anymore, the government lies to us about all these numbers. Right now, our economy is falling apart. And the Trump administration won't admit it. But, you know, it's not something you can hide. You know, and you can use the semantics and say, oh, well, it's just an energy shock. Well, it is a shock when people pull up to the pump and they have to pay more money. And what's even more alarming is the price of diesel, because diesel is what powers trains and trucks and all of these other ships. And so that's all going to filter down to the consumer. You can bet on it. And I don't care what you call it, energy shock or whatever. Prices are going up. And that's not inflation. It's a result of inflation. When you have more money out there in the money supply, people are able to extract a higher price for their goods. Of course, with the economy falling apart, we also have the other factor involved here. People just have no more money to spend. Inflation has tapped them out. And they're already, their level of comfort and where they're accustomed to living is declining. It's declining because everything is costing them more money and their wages are not going up. And I really feel sorry for a lot of people who are on some fixed incomes that are not going up, period. Those people are really, really hurting. And there's a lot of them out there. Americans are hurting. And that brings me to the next and thing I want to mention again, and that's what's going on in Iran. You know, I'm sorry, I'm completely flummoxed by President Trump and his administration and what's going on over there. Doesn't he know he needs to end that conflict? And the only way that he needs to end it is with a victory. I mean, a complete victory. You know, one of these phony peace things is not going to cut it. You know, President Trump is a person who cherishes his popularity and his positive ratings. Well, it's not going to look good for him. It is not going to look good for him. No, sir. Not at all. You know, let's take a look here. Let me pull this down here. So, you know, oil's right now $86.80 a barrel. So that's going to take it up to about $4.50, $4.60 a gallon. And some places, obviously, it'll be over $5. California, maybe over $6, $7, who knows. But those states, they get what they vote for. And this is one area where I don't understand a lot of voters. They complain about the price of oil, but then they keep putting these loony leftists in who want to see there be no oil, okay? They prefer you to take a train or a subway or a bus, not have a car, definitely not have a car. And yet people keep voting for these loons. And one day, these people are going to be really sorry when these loons fully take over. And I think it's going to happen. You know, I know all of these pundits are coming out now and they're complaining, oh my God, socialism, communism, this is terrible. You know, it is terrible. It'll be a horrific chapter, final chapter in the United States of America. But it's happening, and everyone's to blame here. You know, how many people keep putting back into office a legislature who keeps spending eons and oodles of money? I'm telling you, nobody holds these politicians accountable. And I guess they just think we can bar our way to prosperity, but it's not going to work. And I think right now we're at or nearing the end of our rope. You know, Japan also is in a similar position. Their 10-year keeps increasing. They've tried everything to get it to come down, and they can't. And it's just because at some point in time, the lenders say, you know what, this is really a risky bet on this loan. And so they're willing to lend the money, but they just want a little bit more money in their pocket, and that means interest rates have to go up. So the 10-year is at 4.740. You know, it's been quite a while since we've seen 4.7. But it's been fairly steadily going up the last 2 weeks. I think only one day out of the last 10 or so business days, it's gone up. Only one has gone down. And whatever it went down, the following day it clawed back and then some. And I think this is going to continue. And nobody really talks about this a lot, but, you know, back in the Biden administration, Janet Yellen, she just found it convenient not to issue long-term debt where the interest rates kept increasing, and it was just better to issue short-term debt. And so now the amount of money that we have to borrow on the short term is in the trillions of dollars. And that's certainly multiple trillions of dollars a year, many trillions every year, because it's only, 30, maybe 6 months max, and then they got to roll it over again. But see, those that have the money to lend think that the short term, the interest rate that they're getting justifies them lending it just in the short term, because they know if economic conditions were to drastically change, they don't have to wait long until they can pull their money out. And I believe that between the Fed and the Treasury, they're unfortunately purchasing too much of our debt. And so that's going to result in more and more cost and having more and more borrowing. So we're in this doom loop. We're just going to progressively get worse until sometime the bottom is going to fall out. And I say to myself, is Donald Trump waiting for the bottom to fall out before he figures out what it is he's going to do in Iran? But, it's said that he's looking for a way out. Well, he's been looking for a way out now for several months, and it's not there. In fact, I contend Iran is actually embarrassing the president on the world stage. They keep making one threat after another. And the president keeps making these threats. Oh, I'm gonna blow the country off the face of the earth, and it's just not effective. And it's really so unpresidential. And so I don't know how this is all going to play out. I know it's not playing out well right now. We need to get this war ended and over with. And I keep saying to myself, I just hope and pray that we don't have a major event here in this country, something like, let's say, a major earthquake, a volcano, a hurricane, or any other kind of calamity that's going to cost a ton of money, because we don't have the money anymore. And it's getting harder and harder for us to borrow it. But yet, nobody in Washington, they're not talking about cutting anything. They're not talking about fixing Social Security. They're not talking about anything, which makes you wonder, are they waiting for a collapse? I know that sounds revolutionary almost. But how else can you explain the president with what he's doing in Iran? And let's talk now about Hamas, because, we see in the news here that there's this new agreement that Hamas has agreed to, and they're going to totally disarm. The only problem is we were told they were going to totally disarm the last agreement. Look, these people take their marching orders from Iran. You enter into an agreement only to buy time while you regroup, rearm. We've allegedly been surprised over in Iran at how fast they're able to rebuild some of the stuff that we destroyed. Look, these are religious zealots. They believe God is on their side. And there's nothing we're going to do except completely defeat them that's ever going to work over there. And certainly the president should have known this going into it. So why he's delaying finishing it is beyond me. I gather he's terrified of putting boots on the ground, and that's what's going to be necessary. Well, it seems to me, certainly in decades past, if somebody like Hegseth, if he promised one thing and can't deliver, hey, it's time to put someone else at the helm of defense. I mean, I don't know if he sold the president a false bill of goods or not. I have no way of knowing that. But I certainly know we were told 2 weeks in the beginning, just like we were told 2 weeks for the pandemic. Just, oh yeah, we just got to have a lockdown, just a couple of weeks. That's it, 2 weeks, and everything will be back to normal. And now we find out that they were lying, and nobody's held accountable. The Trump administration is not going to hold anybody accountable. I don't think the states will either. I think, like Florida here, they announced, yeah, we're investigating. But you know what? They could have been investigating a year ago. They could have already had charges. But they're looking for the good press now that the issue is at the helm of the press. And, I think it's disingenuous. I think they're gaslighting us. And you know what? If I see Fauci in handcuffs being charged, then I'll say, hey, you know what? I was wrong. But I don't see any of these other people in handcuffs. People that we know commit crimes. I listened to Rand Paul yesterday. He was talking about he's already made several referrals to the DOJ, and they haven't done nothing on them. Just like they haven't done nothing on any other referral that was made by Congress, whether it be a Senate committee or a House committee. There have been plenty of referrals. There are still active referrals from the Biden time where the statute of limitations has not expired. But the Biden administration wasn't interested in charging anybody, and the Trump administration is unable to charge anybody. We're at a year and a half into the Trump term. Pretty soon, there's that rule that the DOJ cannot, make any kind of political arrest that could affect an election. I don't know when the time frame is that this starts, but it's going to be soon because the midterms are coming up quickly. And then, of course, if the Republicans lose the midterms, and I think that's a very distinct possibility right now. I think the only thing that may save us is people are going to hold their noses and go in there and vote Republican because they have listened to what the Democrats promised, and they don't want any of that. And it's sad that we have to pick the lesser of two evils because, I'm repeating myself here, but what I want to know is we get all these politicians, they run for office, and they all want to be on these committees that have oversight over these different departments. And you know what? They were all snowed. Either that or they were complicit. Take your pick. But why didn't any of them realize what was going on with what they have oversight over? I mean, oversight is useless if you can't find all this billions upon billions upon billions of dollars in fraud. So I think they're both complicit. So I think our country's doomed financially. Our financial system is not going to keep taking this borrowing on steroids. And, we increased our spending because of the pandemic, and it's never been cut back, really. And, they do these mini bills. They no longer pass a budget as is required by the Constitution. And, it would be nice to think that somebody could file, a lawsuit to force them to do a balanced budget. And if not a balanced budget, at least do a full budget so that people could know. Because they do it piecemeal, and people don't realize how much money this country is borrowing. And all of these people are going to be crying so loudly when it all collapses. Because you know what's going to happen then? It's going to be anarchy. It's going to be sheer terror in the streets. Countless people, probably in the millions, will lose their lives. Now, I know most people say, oh, that's impossible. That can't possibly happen. Okay. You can keep believing that. Just pay attention to what's happening right now in the financial markets. You'll see they're falling apart. It's doing a slow death. And some major event's going to happen. I don't know exactly what it's going to be. And that's going to take and put the collapse on steroids, and in a very short order, the whole system will come tumbling down. And then people will be saying, well, how come nobody ever said anything? But people have been saying, just the politicians aren't listening, and the people aren't getting rid of the politicians that don't listen. It's very, very simple. That's just how it is. Anyway, I've ranted enough for today, and so I'm going to let you go. Y'all have a good day. Stay safe. It's crazy out there. It gets crazier by the day. Bye-bye.